Lots of folks on our event here today, and really want to welcome you all to this. And it's from the classroom to the kitchen table. That's what you signed up for. My name is James Hilliard, moderator for this event, which is being brought to you by the team over at Citrix, and we're really glad that they were organizing this event. What we really want to do is we want to talk about, obviously, the changes to education given the COVID-19 pandemic. Want to let you know about some of the people. I called out some of those names out there. If you want to actually, folks, go to the Q&A module, you can actually type in what your role is. And the reason I'm asking that, and I'll call out a few of those, is that we have invited a wide range of folks to attend this. Citrix is a technology company, so we've got IT directors and folks focused on technology, especially within the academic realm. We've got superintendents, we've got teachers, we've got district administrators, we have other school administrators, so a wide variety of folks on the line. And the reason for that wide net invite was because we're going to be talking about the fact that we made it through, and maybe it's a good little round of applause for all of you out there, making it through that first wave of impact to the education system from this COVID-19 pandemic. Now that we've been able to take a little breath, and we're getting ready to move on to these different stages and maybe reopening schools and things like that, we want to talk about what mindset might we want to have and what plans should we be thinking about. And so, Dav, we've got you, VP Business Development for an ed tech company. We've got Ruth, which is an online writer, tutor for college students, and then Phil, principal of a Center for Education in the Illinois area. So again, a little smattering of some of the folks that we have out here. So welcome to you all. You see three other faces on your screen, so let me introduce who's here and kind of what we're going to be talking about. Let me start with Sal Khan. He, as many of you probably know, founded the Khan Academy. That was in 2008. He attended the University of New Orleans, went on to MIT. His senior year there, he was class president. He also holds an MBA at the from Harvard Business School. And what we're going to do, and Sal, thank you for joining us here today. Part of the story that we're going to jump into with Sal is that founding journey of the Khan Academy. And my hope was to share all with you and hear from Sal some of the mindsets that he had. He was doing things differently. And that's what all of us are going to be charged with doing in the coming months. And so that's where I want to go with Sal. We've got Ken Sterling on board. He is Executive VP and Chief Learning Officer at Big Speak. Ken's got a unique education story. He was a high school dropout. He also has an MBA and a PhD. And he's been working last several weeks with schools like University of California, Stanford, USC, talking with them about enriching their online learning. That was actually part of his dissertation back when he was wrapping up that post-grad work. So we're glad to have Ken here. And then John Wilson, you also see. He is with Citrix. He is really their longest tenured education expert for Citrix. He graduated from Barry University, Bachelor of Science there, specialization in administration and in human resources. He had a minor in IT. So we're going to be talking with him as well, getting some really kind of, if you will, stories about how and what teams are doing to get ready for some of the changes coming. So that's our team. You all are more than welcome to ask questions, share comments, give us a challenge if you got as we go through the next hour here. Really open to take this conversation where you all are interested. Sal, with that, the first place I did want to take things was that founding journey a little bit. And, you know, maybe it's the highlights. Maybe we spend about 10 or 15 minutes or so here. And again, one of the things I'm really interested in hearing is what mindset did you have as you began some of this story? And we're going to learn how this was very based on a familiar relationship. As I was going, what was changing in your mind? What observations were you having about schooling and education and maybe parallels to what you're seeing and observing today?
Yeah, no, thanks, James. Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks might be somewhat familiar with how Khan Academy started. I'll try to fill in a few gaps. You go back to 2004. I was a year out of business school. I had just gotten married, and I had family visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And they were in Boston for the wedding, and it just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin Nadia was having trouble in math. And so when I found that out, it turned, I asked her about it. It turns out she was having trouble with unit conversion. Because of that, she had bombed a placement test the previous year, and she was put into kind of a slower math track. And so I told Nadia, I'm 100% sure that you're capable of understanding unit conversion. How about I tutor you and see where that goes? And we immediately had to go into kind of a distance learning model because I was in Boston and she was in New Orleans. So she goes back. And, we get on the phone. We actually ended up using Yahoo Instant Messenger, and they used to have this little function called Yahoo Doodle where you could see each other's writing. And I worked with her every day after school for her after half an hour, 45 minutes. And slowly but surely, she, first of all, started to believe that she could learn unit conversion. Then she learned unit conversion. Then she got caught up with her class, and she got a little ahead of her class. And at that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. I called up her school and I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. they actually let her take it, surprisingly. So, never shied back from advocacy. And that same Nadia who was put in that kind of slower math track was then, after retaking the placement test, actually put into an advanced math class. So I was hooked. It was a little bit of an intervention on my part. I was enjoying tutoring. I was enjoying connecting with my young cousin. So I then started tutoring her younger brothers who were 7 or 8 years old at the time. And then over the course of the next 18 months or so, I was working as an analyst at a hedge fund. The small hedge fund I worked for, my boss's wife became a professor at Stanford Law School. So we moved the firm, so to speak. And the firm was myself, my boss, and his dog. So we moved over out here to Northern California. But more relevant to this, the starting of Khan Academy, word spread through my family that free tutoring was going on. And I found myself every day after work with about 10 or 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country that I was trying to support. And my background is in tech, is in software, and so I was always intrigued by, hey, can technology be used to support teachers, to augment what happens in the classroom, allow people to learn at their own time and pace. And so I started, hacking together some stuff. Back in 2005, 2006, there weren't a lot of good exercises on the internet. Even when my cousins did it, they would run out of problems. They wouldn't be able to get immediate feedback. I, as their tutor or their teacher, I wouldn't monitor. They didn't have dashboards where I could monitor what they were up to. So I started putting some of that stuff together. I had to find a place to put it. The domain name Khan Academy was available. I thought it was kind of a funny name, and it sounded very, very respectable, I thought.
Prestigious.
It was very prestigious. I joke about that on one level because it was like a joke. It was like just me and my cousins. But there was a little bit thing in the back of my mind. Obviously, as soon as you start thinking about tools and software, you're like, well, maybe this thing could scale. And I didn't want it to be even viewed. It was a little delusional back then as, just another piece of software that's out there. I was like, well, what if there's opportunity to create a new type of institution in the world? And, the institution, many of the institutions we respect all have someone's names in it. And, I guess my narcissism put mine in there. And so we were, that was the first Khan Academy. And then, I was showing this software off to a friend at a dinner party. And you can imagine I'm a very fun dinner party guest. And, his name was Zuli. And he's like, well, Sal, this is a cool project you have with your cousins. How are you scaling your actual lessons up? And I said, it's hard. It's hard to do with 15 cousins what I was originally doing with 1 or 2. And he said, well, why don't you record some of your lessons as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your family? And my initial reaction was, no, that's a horrible idea, Zuli. YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for the serious mathematics. But I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea. And I gave it a shot. And, you actually you can go to our YouTube channel and sort by date uploaded. So those first videos are still up there from November 2016. And they're just things that I found myself explaining a lot. Why should I have to keep explaining the same concept on the phone? And I started telling my cousins, hey, give me requests. I'll make little explainers. I'll do worked examples. And that way, when we get on the phone, we can dig deeper into the subject. And after about a month of that, I asked them for feedback. And they infamously or famously told me that they like me better on YouTube than in person. And there's I think a lot in that. There's one view that, well, how is that possible? You're getting your live cousin. Well, why would you like this, on-demand version? Well, because he's on demand, and there's no stigma associated with it. You could be a 14-year-old who forgot how to divide decimals. You don't have to be embarrassed. You can watch it as much as you want, pause, repeat, watch on double speed, watch on half speed. So I just kept going, and it was public, and it started to become clear that people who weren't my cousins were watching. And then, I started getting thank you letters from folks. Even that was a big deal. Most comments on YouTube were not thank you.
No.
and then and then they were more intense. People emailing me, this is why I was able to pass my algebra class. This is how I'm feeling confident after leaving the military to go back to college. This is what allowed me to finish my degree, etc. So I kept going. By 2009, I had trouble focusing on my day job. There's about 100,000 folks who were using these resources on a monthly basis. My wife saw that this was where all my energy. I was really enjoying this, and I set it up as a not-for-profit in 2008, just kind of hoping that maybe I could find other volunteers to help me out with this thing. That over time I did have delusions or ambitions that this could become like an institution for the world that exists on the internet. But by 2009, I'm like, I can't wait, either for me to become independent and wealthy, trying in the hedge fund world, or for other people. I've got to jump in. And my wife and I, we were saving for a down payment for a house, but we figured we could live off of savings for a little bit. She was a medical resident at the time, so she was making a little bit of money. And I took the plunge. And I think anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, you kind of have to start with that delusional optimism, assuming that the world will conspire to help you. And those first months were hard. I knew it was onto something. A lot of people were finding value in it. But, we were digging into our savings, about $5,000 a month. My first child had been born. Our expenses were up. So, yeah, there were nights. I mean, I laugh about it now, but, I would wake up in the middle of the night. What have I done to my career, my family, et cetera? But, long story short, I'm happy to talk more about it. But by about May of 2010, so about 10 months after quitting my job, we started getting some of our first significant donors to become essentially a real organization.
What do you think it was, as you reflect now and look back? What was the appeal to those outside of your family? What do you think it was that you can really point to, or maybe it's two things, that really grabbed the attention and made this something that then had an audience that you could scale to?
Yeah, and I wasn't the first person to make education videos or any type of thing on the internet by any stretch of the imagination. Probably was the 500th person to do it. I think what resonated with folks is, I think there's a couple of things. I think what I was doing for my cousins was probably the first methodical and comprehensive effort, at least on YouTube. So I wasn't just making a bunch of edutainment videos and just trying to get click. I was trying to methodically go through algebra.
You were taking the time. You were investing in.
I was taking the time, and I was scaffolding it up, and it was actually counterintuitive to folks back then. Now people, it's somewhat obvious that you could chunk up things into 10-minute sessions.
Right.
They don't have to be these hour-long or 90-minute things that we're used to in traditional schooling. And in those 10-minute sessions, you actually can cover all of physics or chemistry and so I think that was one aspect, the breadth and the depth of it. I think the other thing is it was just this conversational, very, for lack of a word, loving tone. People, I think it was a blessing that I was making that first content for my cousins. I was just me. I was authentic. I wasn't some corporation that was trying to sound like a GPA. The next step in factoring this quadratic, which that sounds professional, but the human brain shuts off of that. It doesn't de-stress. It doesn't feel personal. And I think, I have some eccentricities that I didn't feel. I had a low filter because I thought it was for my cousin. I think people enjoyed that. I think I tried to give my cousins, and by virtue of my cousins, everyone, some of the same thinking that I had that served me well as I went through a career in STEM and all of that. I'm very transparent with my thinking. I think a lot of times teachers want to just give the answer and kind of make it look somewhat magical. A lot of the videos, even today when I make them, I literally am doing them in real time. It's not like I have a script planned. It's not like I've done that problem 100 times. I like to actually look at the problem the first time and be very transparent with my thinking to students. And I think that's a form of vulnerability that folks aren't used to.
Well, Ken, let me bring you in the conversation here because, again, your field of study and your graduate work focused on that. What concerns do you maybe hear from those? And I know you have a lot of focus on the college world and universities. The concern of them maybe being more authentic instead of professorial when they're doing this distance learning, because that's one of the observations I have is people are taking in our old traditional classroom learning and we're just putting technology to it. Now let's just do it online. And that doesn't work, right? Sal did things differently. He did it with the familiar friendliness and jokiness and things like that. What concerns and challenges do professors have of trying to make this transition and change?
That's a great question. And I also was speaking with a parent last week who happens to be a friend and client, and their son is in the second year of college, and they were talking about the experience their son was having and saying, our son is not engaged, he's tuning out, he's in a 3-hour lecture session on Zoom. And I kind of laughed lightheartedly, and I said, what's so interesting, that didn't work in person. Kids were falling asleep, they were on social media, they were zoning out, not showing up to classes. What makes professors, what makes people designing instruction at the college level think it's going to work now? So I think that's a nice embodiment and a nice kind of symptomatic presentation of what we're going through. So backing things up even before we were on lockdown and before this was a necessity, the classes that were getting high engagement and the professors that were getting high ratings from their students typically are designing learning experiences that are engaging, that have group work, that have project-based learning, that aren't a lot of watch someone talk for 2 hours or 3 hours and then a lot of book work and what I call busy work. That's another challenge that I'm seeing and I'm helping at the college level is for some professors who may not be adopting how to, and Sal, I like what you said about kind of augmenting, supporting, learning with what you do, is also enhancing. What are some things we can do where we embrace this technology and things that maybe we couldn't have done or that were more challenging before? And I think that's really where kind of that area of opportunity and that beautiful moment is in education right now, is for educators and administrators to embrace, okay, how do we not only make this equal to, how do we actually make it better than it was before? And so I think this is a beautiful moment in the education process.
Sal, I want to get a quick question to you, and then John, mix you into the conversation. And this is a little bit of a tech question, but Sal, you used YouTube. YouTube's simple. It's easy. I am, again, high school, middle school, and fourth grade. There was one lesson that I went on with my fourth grader, and it was no less than 8 clicks to get from assignment to where something was and listen to a bit of audio on one app, and then in the middle of the assignment I had to sign up for a new application that we hadn't used yet, and it was just so complicated. Again, to the success that you had, how was ease of use of technology and access to that? How much of a factor was that in your success?
Oh, yeah, I think that's a big deal. I think there's something psychological that happens. I see this even, now Khan Academy is a 200-person organization. You see some of this stuff even within our own organization. And we work with a lot of educators as well. And sometimes people are afraid to do something that almost feels too easy. It's like, oh, there must be the complicated version is almost more comforting. Like, okay, now I'm doing my job. This is complicated.
Right.
The simple version, yeah. So that's my only view there. Even today, even in our own organization or outside of our organization, like video is I still think there's so much more to be done there, even though it's kind of low tech at this point. There's so much more to be done with just interactive exercises. People immediately want to jump to like, how can we leverage VR and artificial intelligence? I was like, maybe, but like, there's still a lot more to do with some basic things. And, I was helping some teachers, and we have a little project, I'm happy to talk about it, about matchmaking teachers with students over Zoom and Google Meets. And it was this super complicated process where they were trying to get these tablets and, have 2 Zoom accounts and come in at the same time. I was like, no, just take a whiteboard, put it behind your head like this, Right. And they're like, can we do that? I was like, yeah,
Yes, you
it'll
can.
be better.
Yeah, John, I know you talk with, again, out there as you're talking to, these school districts and school communities. The ease of use, and I know this from talking to tech people all the time. We used to have, computer sprawl, and then we had VR sprawl, and we have some type of sprawl with the technology that we lay out there. Ease of use has really got to be something, because you've got teachers that are going to have to learn this. You've got the networks that need to be set up to manage this, and you've got the students, as my example, that they have to navigate this. And if it's not simple, give me a story recently of just something that was so overblowingly complex that it blew your mind of how crazy complex it had become and was getting in the way of learning.
Yeah, I was just actually recently helping a vocational school where it's required for the students to physically be on campus. They have to physically come out there. So with this COVID-19, that's everything that's going on, it had to drastically change. And one of the challenges they were having, because everybody came up with a quick fix solutions to where they were using VPN and other metrics. And what happened was a lot of the students, they were great with their hands, but they weren't great with technology. There was a lot of things that they had to remember, different usernames, different passwords. So the school was spending a ton of money on resetting passwords and also, just fielding phone calls from their IT department about just simply resetting passwords. What we were able to do was set them up with a simple solution with the Citrix workspace standard to where they had a single sign-on, which pretty much simply means that as soon as the user sign on one time, they have access to all their applications. And they don't have to put in their username or their password. And one of the things about Citrix, we've been doing this now for over 30 years, is that when they sign on, they have access to everything on a single pane of glass. So what that means is that once you sign on, everything is visible to you right there on your screen. You don't have to search and look for anything, which cuts down the amount of time that you have to use searching for certain applications or certain things that you want to use online. And it's user-friendly. So the same way it is that you sign on to an iPad or a regular computer or to your cell phone, no matter what electronic device you're using, it all looks the same. And that's what we take pride in, is that user experience. It's so simple that anybody is able to use it. So no matter if you're a first-generation college student, if you're a third-generation college student, the experience is the same for you. It doesn't take a lot to be able to learn it. And then you have access to everything. And that's what we take pride on, is just that great user experience, which makes it easy for the user to be able to use, whether it's faculty or students.
Let's use that as the jumping off point of, I imagine, and I've talked to some of my, because again, having been at the same elementary school now for almost 12 years with my 3 kiddos, we know the teachers and the principal, and so been talking to them. And one of the ideas is that some of the summer will be spent evaluating what the fall is going to look like, and specifically here at K-12 is my example. What mindset, Sal, do you have a bit of advice for how someone, say a principal or some of the top decision makers at K through 12 schools could maybe just pause for a moment and just really reset things? What would you advise them is the most important thing to focus on first in planning for the fall and what school may look like moving forward?
Yeah, it's something we're trying to think through a lot and help with districts. I think the first thing is view summer as an opportunity. A lot of times people just view this as a gap where learning doesn't happen. Famously, you have the summer slide. This year you can view this. We have a 6-month summer, 5-month summer. We need to keep kids learning. So if I was a principal, we have or a superintendent, we have a couple months until summer officially starts. How do you keep kids learning through the summer? And it does not have to be full-blown virtual school distance learning. It can be, how do we make sure, especially in math, reading, and writing, kids get, depending on their age, 20 minutes to an hour per day of each of those things. That not only can help mitigate a lot of the damage that's been done from school closures, it actually could create a world where some kids actually might not have the summer slide. They actually might show up more prepared than they would have otherwise. And frankly, I think that's a great muscle. It's a silver lining that I hope we can take out of this crisis that goes on forever. That summer is a time for learning. then I think the next thing to think about is what happens back to school. There's an opportunity now where in a normal back to school, if a principal or a teacher wanted to do something fairly avant-garde, hey, what if we had a 2-week period where every student is allowed to learn at their own time and pace, or if we double down on the basics on math, or, most people said, no, let's not rock the boat too much. But I think this year everyone is open to it. And so I would use that as an opportunity. I wouldn't, I guess you could say, waste the crisis, to paraphrase Winston Churchill. And think about, you could start the school year earlier. You could start it, or you could have kind of a new model, at least for the beginning part of the school year, focused on this idea that kids are going to show up. We always know that kids show up with a variance in their preparedness. That variance is going to be even wider because some kids didn't have access, some kids engaged, some kids, etc. And so that's where I think online tools can be super valuable. We're trying to put learning plans and things together so the school districts can use Khan Academy to address those needs. I think it's especially pronounced in math, in reading comprehension. Even if you're kind of atrophied a little bit, if you jump into something a little bit more advanced, you can kind of navigate. But if you don't know how to divide decimals, or you forgot how to, multiply negative numbers, and all of a sudden you're in an algebra class, and both of those are needed to solve that equation, you're just going to check out. And I mean, that's why we see, even before the crisis, 70% of kids, when they went to community college, had to take remedial math, which is essentially 6th or 7th grade math. So I think this is an opportunity to try to close that variance, allow kids to learn at their own time and pace, fill in those gaps, and ideally keep going. And I think the next thing they need to think about is there's a very, in fact, it's likely that there might be future closures, or that even when the schools open, they're not going to be open in a normal way, that they're going to have to be socially distanced, you're going to have shifts. So I think all educators have to be prepared for, hey, there are these things, these strategic supplements, these online tools that you were using as a kind of a nice to have before this crisis, but you might have to lean a lot on them. So whatever it might be, Khan Academy, Citrix, other tools, I would actually get in the habit of using them even while school is normal, so that when school, if it does shut down, if it gets weird, you can just lean on them quite easily without a lot of disruption.
Ken, how are the universities that you're talking to, are they accepting of this hybrid idea? I'm borrowing a term from the tech world, but that, school will most likely, and there are people that are saying it won't ever be just back into a classroom ever again. There are also many that say, but we need some classroom activity. We need some face-to-face. We are human beings, so it can't all be virtual. So where do you see them coming together? Are they getting comfortable with that idea that there's going to be something hybrid? And like Sal said, that even moving forward, if we did open every classroom back up as it used to be, we still are going to have this online aspect to it. Where do they stand?
That's a great question. It varies, and it's still early for high-level administrators to take an official position. We could speculate about that a little bit. Hybrid's been around actually for a really long time. And I even remember when Sal started, and by the way, this is kind of a fanboy moment, big idol. I love all the work that you do. And when you talked earlier about the students and making the work challenging, what I remember is when you started to formalize Khan Academy, in addition to the videos, you had those computer exercises where you're teaching kids math. And what Sal explained, and I think this is so important right now, is that what a lot of educators are doing in their instructional design is they're just piling the work on, and they're dumping a bunch of challenge. And what Sal had discovered and what his technology was enhancing even, 10 years ago, was let's start the kids off, let's start the learners off at a certain level. Let's give them a challenge, a math problem that they can solve. Okay, they can solve this, let's move on to the next level, let's move on to the next level. And then they would hit a wall. And then the system would actually back up to help them build confidence. And especially when the teacher's not right there or the TA is not right there, giving the student learner this confidence of, I can do this work, I'm just not hit with a stack of work, I think is going to be so, so important for as we move along.
No, absolutely. And as kids may be at home, mom and dad might be doing this. I've got my kids in the other rooms right now. They are doing their schoolwork now as I'm doing this, and my wife is off at work. And so they don't have someone to give them that immediate feedback. And so having that built into kind of how learning will be structured. Sal, how much teaching the teachers do you think needs to be a focus for K through 12 higher ed because they're being asked to really change what they went to school and how they learn to become and do their profession?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it, making sure that they're supported, and frankly, making sure that they understand that sometimes they're putting constraints on themselves that may not exist. I mean, I'll give an example. We started a school. We have a school called Khan Lab School. I'm on the board, and obviously my kids go there, so I'm very close to everything that school does. And what Ken was just describing, I felt like some of that was happening because the teachers felt pressure to show that they are still doing a lot even in this time, but it was actually counterproductive because it was putting extra and unnecessary pressure on parents and all of us. And so at our last board meeting, I told the head of school, I was like, let the teachers know it'll help everyone if everyone takes it a little bit more easier and does it a little bit in a lighter way. So I think there's that. But what we've been trying to do at Khan Academy is we've always been trying to educate teachers about, teachers have always known either intellectually or at a gut level that, hey, there's kids all over, at different levels here. I'm teaching to the middle, or oftentimes it's actually the 23rd percentile. Research has is what teachers teach to. So most of the kids are bored, and then some of them are lost. And teachers always knew that. There's kids that kind of eyes glazed over staring at them, and no one wants to teach in that environment. And so we've always been talking about, hey, there's tools now where you can have every kid learn at their own pace. You have data real time. You could walk around, do focus interventions with particular students, and that's more rewarding, frankly, as a teacher, because you form those real connections. You have real data on what's going on. Obviously, now in this COVID world, we're trying to up our game. We're running free teacher webinars. Everything we do is free. It's all philanthropically funded. We're doing webinars for parents, for teachers, anyone who's interested. We are trying to put in kind of game plans for districts over the next back to school season along the lines that we just talked about. I have a Skunk Works project with a couple of districts where I'm trying to figure out, are there ways to matchmake students and teachers? If a student needs help on something, that there's a teacher in the cloud, so to speak, that can get on a video conference with them and start to talk to them. So I think training is an important thing, and I think permission is an important thing. It goes back to, if kids are really learning, and it goes to Ken's point of historically you sit in class for hours, but if you're, most of that we remember, we've all been there. We weren't, the active learning wasn't there. If you are truly active learning for even 2 hours in a day, you are going to learn a lot in your life. And I think when people start to realize you don't just have to fill time and space, you just have to make it effective, it can actually make it a lot more fun for everybody.
That's something interesting that I've keyed on a little bit in the journey I've been having. Talking to a couple of the elementary school teachers, I said, well, how much do you really teach in a day? Because I was getting this feeling that there were their parents saying, well, look, my kid's not doing 6 hours work. They're at school for 6 hours. They need 6 hours of work at home. So I was asking the teachers, and I had an elementary school teacher say that she taught about 45 minutes a day. And then it's the walking around the classroom. It's the helping the student that wasn't getting it when the students that did get it and were accelerating on. Then they went on, did some extra work or whatever. But the actual teaching, and it goes, Sal, to your point of those shorter chunks of content, and that we remember those, we can process it, then we move on to something else. And so I think that was part of your comment on the permission of, permission to teachers, that you don't have to meet parental expectations of 6 hours of, learning, because that's just not, the four of us can't do that. I would challenge anyone online here to really be able to focus and comprehend and absorb 6 hours.
I'll give you a thought experiment that I do, especially with the higher education. If we wanted to truly, I feel like there's a lot that's researched at universities, but there's not a lot that's researched of when the learning happens. Go to a top university, where the kids are, and kids are sitting, and this is normal times, they're sitting in lectures for the whole term, and then give them a pop final 2 days before the final that you thought the kids thought were a final. I suspect you're going to see all the kids fail it, and then have the real final, and they pass it. Well, what happened? Well, between those 2 points, they crammed for about 6 hours.
Yeah.
So what's happening is they're getting a lot of that learning in about 6 hours. And if the class is one of these classes that Ken described, it's not interactive, it's just kind of a passive, that's a ritual that everyone feels like they have to go through, but I don't think there's a lot of evidence that it actually is when the learning happens.
John, we're using video here. It's one of the tools that a lot of teachers are trying to utilize to do either group work or do some of the one-on-ones during their office hours and this and that. As you're out there talking to communities and teams, let me ask you a little bit about their preparedness. Do you find that a lot of the districts that come to Citrix looking for support on technology, they have the bandwidth, they have the robust networks, they have the infrastructure that's in place to be able to make sure that a community that is well off is going to be able to provide learning, and a community that is suffering from other socioeconomic issues can still provide the same level of learning? Is there a big disparity between what networks are available and bandwidth and all that? What do you see from folks?
James, that's actually a great question. What at Citrix, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is being flexible. We know how important education is, and that's one of the things that we try to do. We try to support education as much as possible because we know that they ask for the IT department to do a whole lot with a small budget. So we're extremely flexible, and one of the things that we have done was being flexible with things like such as campus-wide initiative to where they're able to get the Citrix services at 1/3 of the cost that it will cost for a regular company. We know how difficult things could be for the education department, and me coming from a background to where my mother had to leave Haiti to come to the United States on a boat to make sure that she didn't have to select which child was going to go to school or not, it's very, very important to me. So me being a first-generation college graduate and everything, now my sister's in school, my wife is currently in med school right now. Education is extremely important for us. So this is something that at Citrix we're extremely passionate about, and I'm happy that I was just able to be aligned with the education department to be able to bring that to fruition. Because a lot of times the schools that reach out to us or the schools that we reach out to, they don't have an IT infrastructure. Pretty much it's a patch made-up system. And what's happening is that during this COVID-19, a lot of it has opened up their eyes and like, well, we're not ready to operate with remote learning. So we've been able to put up their infrastructure in less than some schools in 2 to 3 days, other schools about a week, that we're able to get that IT infrastructure up to where they will have everything up in the cloud and where they can have their Citrix environment running in no time. And we've also opened up the door for them with features such as the remote PC that comes with the Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So what that does, it allows them to use their physical computers at the school to where the students can log into it remotely from their home. So they have access to everything that they have on campus at home as well, and it doesn't matter which device that they're using. And with that, the IT department doesn't have to purchase any servers or any storage, which takes up the majority of their budget. So we're able to help them get everything up and running, and there's no additional cost to have that with the Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So we take pride in being there for schools that are economically challenged, and they're dealing with budget constraints. We're willing to go that extra mile to be able to make sure that they're able to get a product such as Citrix, which is also important that we're SIPA compliant as well, which is the Children Internet Protection Act. So that's a huge thing for K through 12 and also for college, campus, university, and community colleges as well. And we take pride in that.
Yeah, and that is something I know a lot of folks are talking about too, is looking at the safety of all the information online. Obviously now we're putting all our kids on line. We've got these webcams going on. I mean, there's some certain things, Ken, that I would think are being thought about too at especially the university level, of protecting student privacy and in encouraging them to utilize the tools, but also be practice safely while engaging online and knowing who they're engaging with online. All is that discussions that you're hearing them talk about as well?
It is, and that's something that's been interesting as we've researched online for years. There's a population of students who are shy, they're very introverted, they're very concerned about safety or what people will think of them. And what's wonderful about online education up to this point is that those students who sat in the back of class, who maybe didn't participate as much in person in a live classroom setting, they tend to participate more and engage more with chats, with asynchronous communication, because they can moderate and modulate what they're saying, and they can backspace and feel that they're presenting themselves well. So that's the good part of it. The next part is, now that we're here and everyone's in this environment, now these concerns have come up again. Okay, is it safe for me to present? Who's looking at my comments and chat? So security is definitely very important.
Interesting, you're bringing up the different learning styles, and Sal, you had mentioned this a bit earlier as well. I have, my youngest is active, and when he has to get on one of the Google Classroom meetups like this and do a lesson, that's not what he wants to do. He sees that as a bit of a waste of time. He doesn't want to listen to he wants to get down and actually just do the work. And he's more, and that's where he wants to go. So we're trying to strike that balance. A question for us to maybe ponder for a little bit here is how do we, you had said, Sal, I believe the number you put was about 23% that we kind of teach towards that population within the classroom. Thoughts, ideas on how maybe a switch of a mindset from our admins and our teachers can get us doing more to reach each different type of population that we have in the classroom? In what are ways that we might be able to structure content to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. And to your point about your son, I think that is a sign that, ideally the video conferencing sessions that he's a part of are more interactive, that, his teacher would say, hey, okay, here's the first step. Anyone know how to, why don't y'all break up into groups if the video conferencing supports it, and try to figure out a novel solution to it. Hey, let's do a brainstorming exercise. How would you approach it? Have a conversation. I think stuff like that is engaging to anyone and everyone. But I completely agree. If it's just like a passive, and I always say, like, if you're even in live, if you're just giving a lecture, that can happen on video, and that's that much more obvious now on a video conferencing. If one of us were to just present for the whole hour, that could be a video. Why does it have to be a video conference? So I think that's the normal thing. And the 23rd percentile is interesting. There's some research study I read several years ago that's where teachers tend to teach, the 23rd percentile, but that means that you still have 77% that are bored, and then you actually have 22% that are lost. you can only hit that one little narrow that one little narrow zone. And so what we've been advocating for even before COVID is let all kids be very active, learn at their own time and pace. You as the teacher get information in real time on where they are, and that you can then do focused interventions based on what kids need what. In the physical setting, that would be, hey, the four of you come with me. Let's go over negative numbers. Hey, the four of you, you've already done this. Here's this enrichment exercise. Or one-on-one. Hey, Ken, I see you're having trouble. What can I help you with? And you sit down and have that one-on-one meeting. It's incredible. If you remember even your own childhood, how many one-on-one meetings did you have with the teacher that was a really caring, and the teachers all want to do it. The teachers want it, but they're spread thin. But when you have that, even if it's 5 minutes, you remember those. I remember moments like that when I was 7 years old, where the teacher came up to me and said, hey, Sal, why don't we talk about this for a little bit? And I still have remember those interactions. So the more of those that you can do, and now in this virtual world, you can imagine a teacher, instead of just saying, I'm going to make this a time to deliver a lecture, you can say, hey, here's when I'm available on the video conference. I want y'all to be able to do this at your own time and pace, but I am here to do these focused breakouts, and based on the data I'm seeing, here are the focused breakouts that I'm going to be doing for the day, and that's going to be active problem solving. Or I'm kind of the genius bar, so to speak. If you need help with anything, I'm there to help you. You can kind of, just have it running in the background, and I can say, hey, John, you just did that interesting thing. Can we talk about that a little bit? I think stuff like that could be incredibly interactive.
I want to jump to an idea, and John, you brought it up a little bit. I think it's what triggered my thought here about how obviously Citrix can deliver technology that can save organizations money out there. I've been reading, there are concerns, I'm here in California as well, concerns of major budget issues to school districts. I know that JFK University, it's been here in the San Francisco Bay Area since about 1965, closing their doors at the end of the year. They were already going through some troubles, but now this has kind of accelerated their need to close and all. So I guess what I'm wondering is, are we going to lose some teachers? Are teachers going to be spread even thinner? Is the one-on-one going to be even harder to accomplish, given that COVID-19, this pandemic, is accelerating a just huge shakeup in education?
Well, James, I hope not. It is unfortunate that some universities have to close their door. That should never be the case. We should always be there to be able to support our institutions. At Citrix, that's one of the things that we're really focused on. And one of the things that our primary focus is what we call business continuity plan, to where we try to put something in place to be able to make sure that we can try to meet them at their budget. And with one of the things with Citrix that's so important from an IT perspective and from a school perspective is being able to have complete visibility and security. Sal, Ken, you guys brought up a lot of great points today, and one of the things that you discussed about is security. Well, with the Citrix security, it's pretty much like a Swiss Army knife. It's compatible and agnostic with all the services. So, if you have another provider, we're able to seamlessly work with that and begin to help you reduce the cost that you're spending on other vendors. So you're able to use Citrix, which eliminates a lot of other vendors, such as VPN, single sign-on, firewall protection. So you're able to have our application delivery controller that acts not only as a firewall, but also as a single sign-on for you, which helps reduce your CapEx, reduce the expenditure costs that a lot of the schools are spending to be able to help them possibly be able to keep more teachers on staff. We've actually been able to help schools grow their IT department because one of the things that happen is by them having Citrix, they've been able to sign up more students. They've been able to reach more students. They've been able to broaden their horizons. A lot of the things that they didn't think was possible have now become possible. Like all the schools, the universities, the K through 12s, the community college that had Citrix before this COVID-19, they're actually expanding. They're calling us to place more orders for more licenses. We've been able to help them not just sustain their business, but able to grow their business. And for education, that's key, because if you have more students, you're going to need more teachers. You're going to need more professors. You're going to have to grow your staff. So, James, that's a great question. I hope that we're not getting to the point where a lot of schools are going to have to shut down. What we're trying to do, we're trying to help schools be able to expand and be able to grow and expand their footprint and be able to have other campuses as well to be able to support the students that they're going to be able to have. So hopefully we're able to help, save jobs and be able to help the students be able to acquiesce to learning online.
Ken, what are the concerns that the universities you've been working with have about the number of students they can support? Do they feel that they're going to be able to bring on all the students in the fall that they normally might be able to bring on? What are they planning for?
Great questions. And thankfully, so far, the campuses that I'm working with feel that there's going to be a robust enrollment and there's going to be a robust engagement in terms of students. Some of the questions that I'm overhearing that don't really relate to the work that I'm doing is, what do we do with our dorms? What do we do with our food services? Things like that. In terms of the education and the learning, they feel pretty good about it, and many are ramping up. some of the concerns that have been coming up and a couple of the challenges that have been coming up are simple things like bandwidth. Some students, should they offer their classroom lecture hours the same time that they were normally? Should they pre-record? How many students can they support? What are some of those technological considerations? My hunch, based on the way technology evolves rapidly during times of necessity, is over the summer, a lot of the large companies, Citrix and other companies will hack on this a little bit more and be able to host 300 to 400 student general classes, with ease and things like that. So the professors seem to be a little concerned about, how do I host this many students? How do I engage them? How can I have breakout rooms, discussions, those kinds of things?
Sal, have you a magic ratio in your mind, in folks you've worked with, talked with, of a great balance between self-paced, teacher-led, pre-recorded, the live interactions? Is there something out there that you're seeing that you can share with us of, again, as we're trying to think about what we might structure, hey, we don't want to just give 6 hours self-paced learning, go do it, hope you have a good education, but we know that we don't have the teachers to do one-on-ones like this, because these one-on-ones do take more time than a one-on-one in a classroom. In a classroom, I can see someone raise their hand. I can take the 3 minutes. Here, if we're doing this online, we kind of have to set up the meeting. We got to make sure the computer is able to be used by a family member. Got to get our microphones set up, whatever, those types of things. Ratio, balance. How do you think about balancing education for students these days?
Yeah, I actually, I'll reposition a little bit. I don't view it so much as a balance between online and physical. I view it as how interactive can we make it overall? And I'm associated with a lot of tech things, but I think if you had no tech, or in this socially distanced world, you're just on a video conference, but you're doing a Socratic dialogue. I actually do this thing on weekends with friends and family where we talk about how do we become better people, but it's a moderated Socratic dialogue, and you can see all the participants, and we're now doing it obviously over video conferencing. It's highly interactive. We call on people. What do you think? Oh, I like what the other person said. So I think models like that are excellent, and you don't necessarily have to do any asynchronous if that's what that type of material needs. I've been sitting on some business school classes. They've done some case studies on Khan Academy, and the business school classes work great over video conferencing because they're the case-based video class, where the professor asks one person and they give their comment, and then the next person does, and and then they can do things like polling, and you have the chats like Ken was talking about, which you don't typically have in a traditional case-based discussion. So what I would say is, whatever modality you're using, online, offline, synchronous, asynchronous, people learn better when they are engaged, when they are active, when they are actually able to interact. A lot of the arguments against online as well, people need to socialize. People need that human connection. But what I would say is, being one of 100 or 200 people passively listening in a room is not that human. It's actually a pretty dehumanizing experience. What is human is when you can interact, and actually not just with the professor, interact with each other. I mean, I think I had a lot of great experiences from my undergrad, but I remember sitting in those classrooms with 300 people, and I didn't really get to know any of them. I mean, I got to know them outside of that, and there you kind of gravitate the people that are like you, join the same clubs, whatever. But what a lost opportunity for me to be able to get to know those other 200 or 300 people. When I was in business school, that happened a little bit more, and I got to know people who I wouldn't have otherwise hung out with because we interacted with each other in that academic setting. So I would say, whatever modality, just always be thinking, how do you drive more interactions between humans?
And Ken, is that something that you think you'll see more universities, schools invest in to encourage their, whether it's an adjunct professor, a fully tenured professor, a guest lecturer, to really have the time to focus on that, as opposed to the older style of just, hey, come in here, deliver a lecture, and head on off to whatever else you're going to do?
That's the silver lining of the situation is before, and I've been advocating for this, Sal's been advocating for this for years, and now it's a have to, and now the professors, it's kind of like having a television station. and not wanting people to channel switch. And the professors now have that awareness of, I've got to create something interesting and engaging. And for years, I've talked about this, that, when we get out of school, Sir Ken Robinson says the purpose of education is to prepare our students and our kids for the workforce. And I've never walked into a job interview and been handed a Scantron. I've never been handed a textbook and been What I have been asked is, how do I work well with people? How do I collaborate? So what I've always pushed for, and we actually ran a study on this at UC Santa Barbara, where we took the same exact class and we did the standard learning, and then we did only group-based, project-based learning with the same learning outcomes. The engagement was much higher, and the term papers, which were virtually identical in terms of the rubric, the term papers were actually superior in the class that we did the group-based or the project-based learning. It's kids, people, us, adult learners, we want to do things that are interesting and engaging. We don't want to be spoken at.
Sal, is there, and this is a tough question, maybe it is there a video that you created that you go back and point to and say, man, that is the best video I ever put out there for anybody to watch, whether it was math or something else? Is there something that you're like, man, that was my good one? And I ask you because if there is, I'd love people to be able to search it and see your example, what you think is something that's engaging and just rocked, whether it was just you and your niece or an extended family, etc.
Yeah, there's not one in particular, but I'll tell you the kind of a class of videos or things that have happened in videos that in hindsight I thought made them good. And actually what's ironic is when I was making them, I almost felt like editing that part out, which was, I've gotten a lot of feedback every now and then if I do a worked example. As I said, I do them in real time, and I go down the wrong train of thinking for a little bit. Wait, that's not exactly right. Wait, okay, and then I back up. And your ego wants to edit that out because you don't want the universe to see, oh, Sal Khan of Khan Academy didn't know how to do made a mistake. But I can't tell you how many letters I get from students and parents that made me feel so good. It made me realize that these are puzzles. You can go down. Even Sal, he went down the wrong path for 2 or 3 steps, and then he backed up, and then he went down the right step, and I could see his thinking, and you could even see, like in some of those videos, you can almost feel me getting the heebie-jeebies, like I think I'm down on the wrong path because this is something weird is happening, and that modeled it for them, like, oh, that's what it feels like when I'm actually doing it, which they never see. I think there's stuff anything that brings out the humanity. There's an early video, I forgot which one it is. If I knew, I'd tell you the link, where my wife and I tend to be sometimes obsessive and extreme about things, and she's always been very supportive of this whole Khan Academy project and all my crazy projects. But we had a conversation in those early days about, Sal, you need some balance in your life. You need to help out with the kids. You need to do this. Dinner has to be ready, etc. And there was one night where I wanted to make videos, and I thought my wife was going to be home later than she did. And then all of a sudden I hear the door open, and I'm like, oh, wait, I got to quickly go through this example because my wife's here and I'm not supposed to be recording videos right now. and it's in the video. And there's another one where like a telemarketer called, and I thought this was for my cousin, so I just like answered the phone while I was on the video, and I was like, no, I'm sorry, no, we're not interested. No, we're happy with our cable service. I don't want to refinance my mortgage, whatever. And I left it. But I think that's the type of thing that humanizes things and makes people feel comfortable. Anytime you let your filter down, obviously responsibly, but let your filter down. I have that. I do this thing where e to the I pi is equal to -1, which is kind of mind blowing. But I felt it in the moment, and I said, if this doesn't blow your mind, you have no emotion, and that's kind of even turned into a meme. So I think anytime you do anything that's a little bit truly yourself, truly authentic, a little bit eccentric, I think people will connect better.
Yeah, I see you both, John and Ken, shaking your heads there, and me as well. I mean, there are things that I do working with my son that I'll bring up examples of Fortnite, right? If I see something that's not, relevant, or he's not understanding this World War II reference that's being, taught, I'm like, well, what about like in Fortnite when we do this or whatever? I'll drop some stupid dad joke, and it does make the learning then, oh, well, that was fun. And so one of my my big takeaways, and I'm going to do, we're close to wrapping up here, so I'm probably going to give you each about a 30-second kind of one to grow on or one to encourage those that have been listening today. So think about that for a second. One of mine is just the big takeaway from hearing all three of you is we want to make get the technology out of the way, make the learning accessible, make it easy and authentic. And if it can be authentic, and that might be a change for many people, but if we can do that, that sounds like it's in the benefit for the learners, and that's ultimately why any of us care about education, is we want those learners to enjoy their process, learn throughout life. John, let me come to you first, a final thought for those that have joined us here today.
Yeah, one of the things that I keep with this time that we're in during COVID-19, I'm remembering the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he said, the ultimate measure of a man is not what he does at his time of comfort, but what he does at his time of inconvenience. And at this time of inconvenience right now is when the IT department, IT staff should be reassessing their infrastructure. At this time of inconvenience is when they should be making calls to technology companies to get ahead of it and not to be behind it. At this time of inconvenience is when they should be putting together infrastructure to where their students will have remote learning in place, and their faculty will get acclimated and adjusted to it before the school year starts, because we don't know what's going to happen. So it's better prepared and instead of not being prepared. So that will be my final words: is don't take this lightly, because it may not be just this pandemic crisis. We may have a natural disaster. There may be other things that may prevent us from physically getting to a site to where we can just automatically have our students log on via technology so they can be supported.
Ken, a final thought?
My final thought is a thanks to all the educators out there, everyone in the education industry, before this, during this. Thank you for what is a lot of times a thankless calling, and for adapting and doing the best that you can. And please challenge yourselves to make it interesting and make it wild and make it fun and make it engaging.
And Sal?
Yeah, I'll just double down on that. I think, if we focus on the authenticity, the interactivity, as an educator, realize you have permission to be yourself. You have permission to be fun. And if you're not having fun, it's not going to be fun for everyone. I'll tell everyone at Khan Academy, if you don't have joy when you're creating, whether it's a video or even the software, the person on the